Fred Dashevsky joins us about all things economic, gold and silver. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, and good morning from lovely Hilton Head, South Carolina.
What's your temps like down there today?
It's probably in the mid-50s or so.
But I bet
Very
it's going
palatable.
Yeah. I bet it gets up into the 70s later in the week like it is here, right?
Well, we have had a wild range of heat indexes. It's been strange. It's been anywhere from about 35 to 70. We're kind of teeter-tottering on moving into our spring season, which comes with these sort of jumps in the temperature, and then we start getting higher lows and moving in there. Yeah, but it's going to be really nice here very soon. And the spring breakers come pouring onto the island about mid-March, so here it goes.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, and the other thing, when we're speaking of fluctuations like this, do you see where the stock market, and this is something I've always poked at, the stock market is for the rich. And for weeks, aggressive buying has been concentrated in the same overpopulated names like Palantir, Tesla, NVIDIA. But there's something happening. I mean, they're starting to show cracks in the infrastructure, wouldn't you say?
I would. Certainly we've had a run in the market that's lasted for quite a while that most of the technical analysts would suggest then that, we're due for a 5%, 10% correction. I think that would be perfectly normal. But you're right that the amount of money that's piling into the stock market is definitely concentrated. The big seven certainly has been benefiting. And about 50%, of the money that's coming into the market is coming from the wealthiest people. So a large portion of what's driving the market is coming from a more concentrated group of people. That, adds for some potential problems. I think it's obviously safer if the market is more spread out and, we have many more buyers that are supporting it. So it is a little trepidatious going forward. And certainly, our new president has thrown the cart upside down, the apple cart, and creating an awful lot of volatility that everybody's sort of, struggling to try to stay ahead of the curve and figure out where to position themselves to benefit.
And I understand. I was just talking to a dear friend of mine down in Florida, and before we went on the air, and he's like, hey, maybe we should wait before we do anything until after the first quarter of this year is over so we can see the blowback and what's happening. I mean, this should not stop us from attempting to resort to, accumulation. And what I mean by that is this little puppy I got right here, which are a whole thing of these silver dollars. Yeah. We need to start accumulating at least a little bit of this stuff, which is why Fred is here, because he runs U.S. Coin Capital. He's a member of the American Numismatic Association. He is an MS grader. He looks at mint states, and he can tell you, and he's got outside third parties that can grade certain things. I mean, Fred, have I missed anything?
No, you're right on track. So we're looking at gold today at $29.77 at one point in New York. Wow. So, we're $23 away from $3,000 gold. And, this is happening in a very unstable economy. And I think it's obviously because a lot of people are looking for that safe haven. And I think that's going to become probably more and more among the mindset of a broader number of people. Uncertainty is exactly that, What do we do? And people saying, I'll sit on the sidelines to the end of the first quarter. It may not be a terrible idea. And a lot of times people do that. They'll step back and wait. There is a volatility index that they report in the stock market. And it kind of is that index to show how much up and down movement per day we're seeing, and it's running around 17 or so on the index. It's a little bit higher than average. It used to be 10 to 12, and that was volatile times. Now 17 is almost like a standard, which means that people are expecting volatility. But it's really hard to judge going forward because so many of the things that, President Trump is alluding to, first of all, we don't know whether they'll really happen. He has that habit. And then secondly, we have to figure out how people are going to benefit. But around the world, there certainly is an awful lot of maneuvering, let's call it, for people trying to stay ahead of the curve.
Well, speaking of gold and the volatility of the markets, President Trump has just announced that he's going to go with Elon Musk to check to see if there is indeed gold in Fort Knox.
Yeah.
Between you and me, what do you think they're going to find?
Well, they're heading to Kentucky. They're going to find there is a gold reserve that's there. I mean, Steve Mnuchin, when he was Treasury Secretary, did the same thing. Now, he was the first to go in like 50 years. I think since Truman, Steve Mnuchin was the first Treasury Secretary to stick his head in the door and say, okay, just show me the gold. I mean, it is supposed to be America's gold reserve. Although, actually, for the most part, most of the gold that's held by the United States government is actually in the central bank's vaults in the Federal Reserve Building in the Bank of New York. But we do keep a strategic stockpile of gold in Kentucky at Fort Knox. It's been there, and I'm sure they're not going to find any surprises. I can only imagine the backlash if we were to turn out to stick our head in the vault and it's, what do you mean it's empty? So, yeah, I'm sure there won't be very many surprises.
Well, I mean, look what Biden did with our strategic oil reserve, man. I mean, he depleted it way down, and it's like, look, if we needed it in an emergency, we wouldn't have it.
We wouldn't have it. So I like the idea that at least they're checking on things that we're supposed to have. I mean, it's about time that we did this a little more frequently. You know, you would think we would be subject to more of these. And not only are they alluding to the idea that they want to make a trip to Kentucky and stick their head in the vault and look at the gold, they are now also, Elon Musk has actually said that he's trying to convince Trump that they should consider auditing the Fed as a whole. Now, this is something that has gotten zero traction in Congress since I've been in this business. Ron Paul spent his entire career trying to get the Fed audited and couldn't even make headway. You know, he wanted to audit the Fed completely. He couldn't get that done. He wanted to just audit the accounting. He couldn't get that done. And I think they'll find some surprises if they ever get that accomplished. But, you know, the Fed will only show you how many pencils they have and how much paper they have. But if we can't get into the open market committee operations, it's almost pointless. But what a pushback. But I do find it interesting that we are looking at things that we've sort of accepted and taken for granted for decades, that, okay, there is a gold reserve being held that's supposed to be owned by the American public. Let's see it, you know, just show me the gold. And I like the idea that we are starting to kind of poke at these, you know, substantive ideas and making sure that the dots are, you know, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
But the thing is we're not just poking the bear. I mean, we're poking at deep state. We're poking at the banking cartels, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, and everybody, the Rockefellers, everybody's involved in this. The Carnegie Mellons, the Deutsche Banks, you name it, we're poking at them every time we mention the idea of auditing the Fed or even getting rid of it. But see, the thing is, it's been in existence here in this country since 1913, thanks to Woodrow Wilson. And, you know, what is it, 1933, we filed Chapter 11. The government's been in Chapter 11 ever since, and they're trying to convince us that all the money they're spending is our responsibility to pay it back. It makes sense to you?
I was looking at this. In 1981, we were $1 trillion in debt as a nation. And the panic that ensued after that number was crossed was impressive. And here we are now, 43, 44, 45 years later, and we're 36 trillion. And the interest payments alone, or each year now, I think you pointed this out last episode, it's a $1.9 trillion national deficits now annually, going up from the entire national debt only being $1 trillion in 1981. So these changes are substantive. And clearly, over all those years, as many congressmen have come and gone, many presidents that have come and gone, everybody who's tried to poke a hole and say, what do we do about this Federal Reserve System? Nobody has made any progress. Why is it that we haven't been able to nudge at all against this system, which is a banking cartel? And I mean, it was established the same way that other cartels were established, and they were dealt with. You know, when the railroad cartels occurred and the oil cartels occurred, we busted those things eventually apart as monopolies. We argued that it was more beneficial for the public to have multiple ownership amongst things that were important, you know, oil, steel, railroads, but we've never been able to accomplish this with the banking system. They have had a tight grip on the financial system since this Federal Reserve Act. You know, and most people don't understand the fundamentals of the Fed. We could probably spend hours talking about it. You know, but the critical issue is that we've subbed out the job of printing money from the Treasury Department to a private group of bankers that, you know, effectively have so much control over the issue of capital that they are controlling the American public by virtue of controlling our money. And if we become enslaved to a currency system, we have very little ability to push back. And, you know, this has always led to my belief in the ownership of those silver dollars and gold and silver coins that the public could carry themselves, because at least it gives them a chance to own something that, if the game continues and we just simply allow the printing of capital to pay unpaid bills and dilute the value of money, at least people can own something that actually would go up in value as that occurred. So I still am a big fan of the idea of the ownership of physical gold and silver. Not only should we do it, the government should do it. We should be backing money with something tangible. We should not be operating a fiat system, but I don't see it. I don't know how you feel about it. I just don't think the government would ever be able to really manage themselves if we lock them down to any kind of paper money constraint. I just don't see it.
Well, I'm just wondering too, Fred, based on our conversation here, and folks, this is some serious business because it affects everybody. Because if, they keep saying in that commercial, what's in your wallet? And the thing, you got Jennifer Garner all standing up there, all sexy and everything, holding up a Capital One card. And it's just like, look, phooey to all that. This is what got us in trouble in the first place. And the thing is that if we weren't stocking up on gold and silver, and it comes right back down to gold again, do you think that Trump has it within his purview to undo what Nixon did way back when and put us back on a gold standard? Could he do it?
Well, could he? Yes. Will he? No. I think there is an opportunity that exists, but in order to do that, that would have to be a fundamental change through Congress, and it would be enormous. It would be substantive. It would be something as large as, changing a state's nature. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that. And I think there would be a real pushback against it. And it would come from various sources, and they would all come with the pretense of some legitimacy. They'd have to create a reason. And of course, they could make it so convoluted that the average person is going to get lost in the subject and probably believe what the government tells them for their rationale for not doing this.
That's sad.
Theoretically, if we could do that to any degree whatsoever, the positive change that would have on everybody's assets. Imagine the ability to earn $100,000 this year, not spend it for 5 or 10 years, take it out and then spend it, and actually be able to buy the same amount of goods and services and just not have it be evaporating over time while you're holding it. That would make such a difference for an average American. We could go back to the era after the Great Depression, where people stuffed money under their mattresses for several decades out of fear of the banking system, because they'd lived through a crisis before we had FDIC insurance. And, banks in the old days, when they failed, they failed. That was it. There was no comeback. Nowadays, we have a modern insurance program against it, so that risk is more limited. But if we could stabilize the value of money, that would be huge. And if anybody might get away with this, Trump seems to me to have a far better chance at it than anybody I've seen before him, because, he's kind of established the idea that rules don't apply. And he may come up with something completely outrageous, like, okay, let's reestablish a gold standard. I just don't know that it could work, because I just can't see Congress. I just don't believe that they could manage themselves if we really made them stick to not being able to create all this money. How would they address the interest payments on the debt now?
Yeah.
I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to have to raise revenue through selling more debt. Okay, so let's look at China, for example. The Chinese central bank has announced it's going to create about $3 trillion in new debt this year. They are printing their way out of their economic slowdown. Every other central bank has been doing this. The European Central Bank is doing it. England itself is facing economic slowdowns and piling into gold. They're all facing these same problems. I just would love to see it, somebody put them under that microscope and say, guess what? You can't just go ahead and spend money you don't have anymore. If we don't see a gold reserve equal to the amount of paper that you want to create, you have to do something. You have to either shut down something that's spending money, or you're going to have to raise taxes. So let me tell you, people, if we do go to a gold standard, you should also expect that your taxes would skyrocket. Although I think in the end, it probably would be more beneficial for us in the long term to have that gold reserve against paper than the fiat money we currently have.
Yeah, but the thing is that the Fed is holding a certain amount of this, as you just indicated. We're talking about gold bullion in their coffers, in addition to what we think is in Fort Knox. But the thing is that we cannot take another tax hit. And you've got deep state Congress, who is beholden to deep state, and the Fed, Jerome Powell, who doesn't have to leave until 27, basically giving Trump the middle finger.
Yeah, he hasn't been as cooperative.
I don't know.
Right? And, that should be interesting, too, is there's always an interesting dynamic between the Federal Reserve Chairman and the President of the United States. Sometimes they get along well. When they battle, though, it tends to have a lot of disruptions in the economy. I remember the days of Paul Volcker and Jimmy Carter. When you have a completely disparate Federal Reserve and they are not relating well to the current president, it creates a lot of tension. And in theory, the Fed is supposed to be nonpartisan. They're not supposed to yield to political pressure. Their decisions are supposed to be exclusively economic. That's how they're supposed to operate. But we all know, of course, that there's, an awful lot of politics that goes on in everything these days. And I don't even think the Fed is not subject to some political pressure. But if the Fed and the chairman don't get along, we should expect an awful lot of trouble. I think Powell is biding his time and hoping that, he can just continue to try to do what the Fed has been doing the past several years, which is wind down their enormous balance sheet, somehow stabilize the amount of interest and debt, and manage to do this while the Treasury is out there selling bonds to raise capital more and more and more every month. I mean, the numbers are staggering. So it's going to be an awful lot of money flooding into the economy one way or the other over the next several years. I'm standing on my expectation that I made about 4 years ago for the first time, that by 2029, we're going to be sitting at $50 trillion in national debt.
I'd like to call it federal debt. I don't want them sitting there telling me that I owe now $1 million, because right now, what is it, $330,000 for each American? It's like, I don't think we want to hear that. Why are we the ones being saddled with this? We're not deriving any benefit, especially when you're sending all our money overseas and funding USAID, which has turned out to be nothing more than a slush fund for all these bureaucrats. And a lot of it is coming back into the country after it gets sent out. It's no wonder everybody run for Congress. This is part of our problem, Fred, is we lack transparency, and I think that's what Musk and Doge are really trying to achieve here. Now, moving on to another little category here before we get into the gold and silver specials for the month. Warren Buffett's annual shareholder letter dropped over the weekend, including many familiar notes about earnings and revenue, and also not entirely indirect message for Trump and other elected leaders about his $26.8 billion record tax payment. So he says, take care of the many who, for no fault of their own, get the short straws in life. They deserve better. That kind of sounds socialistic to me.
Yeah, I can understand that too. So we look at the most wealthy Americans and the biggest income gainers and how much they actually pay in taxes. And it's, incredible. Of course, they do have the ability with all that money to hire people who will do everything they can to arrange their income so that they end up paying as little to no taxes as possible.
And that's not illegal.
No, nothing illegal about it. And, Trump has made this point, too. People have said, well, you didn't pay taxes or you didn't do this and that. He's like, look, I follow the rules of, what's available to me. It's not my fault. I didn't play it. Don't blame the player, right? Yeah. Blame the game. So the game is definitely skewed. And clearly the people at the top are benefiting the most from all of it. And the rest of us are sort of just staggering with what's left over, making our little scraps of what we can counter. But we are effectively paying massive amounts of tax revenue because the wealthiest people really don't pay an awful lot. And it's amazing to me. But, again, it's just the nature of the way the game is set up. This is another thing I would find hard to believe we would see substantive changes in because, again, Trump will be favoring, I think, the wealthier people. So this is probably going to continue. Well, but it's remarkable. You look at Bezos and you look at Warren Buffett. How much did they pay personally, in income taxes? And it's negligible. But they also know how to set it up so that they don't get income. Instead, they get stock value growth. They've arranged it so that they don't have the liability.
And see, and we're all playing the stock market and getting beat up on capital gains and all this other stuff because we don't know how to play the market like they do yet. Buffett apparently has sold off more stock and is under cash accumulation. To me, that doesn't make any sense unless he's investing it in gold and silver. Speaking of which, do you have any specials this time around that you're looking at offering our listeners?
Believe it or not, I reviewed a few things, and the silver to me right now seems to be the best value. I love gold at this new high, and I think it's going to continue to go up, so that doesn't concern me at all. But looking for undervalued areas, I'm really falling to the idea that silver is a little better right now as an opportunity. So what I wanted to do is I have a silver special on our website. It's known as the 2-bit, and it comes with 50 silver half dollars pre-64 and a certified and graded Mint State 65 100-year-old Morgan silver dollar. Wow. And that package is $915. For any of your listeners, between now and the end of this month of February, I'll take off another 5% off that for anybody mentions your show between now and the end of the year. So it's a $915 item minus the $47 or so if we take off the 5%. It's a great opportunity, a very inexpensive way to accumulate silver. People buy these sometimes in several at a time, one at a time, it doesn't really matter. But that would be the best deal I think is available right now. The other side of the market that's been interesting is the rare end. I just received a catalog from the most recent large auction, and there were so many new coins now. They're in the $2 million, $3 million range, which is to me remarkable because I do remember when I first started how we were basically told there would never be $1 million coin. We would just never get there. And now there are coins that are $15 million for single coins, and literally hundreds of them that have crossed this $1 million barrier. And that to me is an indication of both interest by the real powerful people to accumulate the ultra rarities. And also, if you look at it, it's the flip side of a paper dollar that's worth a lot less.
So the thing is back to this special again, it's $915, and then you're taking another 5% off if they say, I listened to you on the Krieger files, and this is what we're doing for you. We're going to give you another 5% off. So
Correct.
The thing is that how many of the half dollars are you getting
50,
in addition to the Morgan?
Yeah,
you're getting 50 half dollars.
50 silver half dollars. They were all 64 and earlier. And they'll include a mix. They might be Kennedys. They might be Franklins. Sometimes a lot of the Walkers get thrown in there because I don't really screen those out because we buy these things in large quantity. I know I can make an extra $1 on those. It's not worth it. So you'll get kind of a random mix. And then the additional silver dollar is a Mint State 65. So,
That's good.
Incredibly high quality 100-year-old coin, sealed in an NGC holder. And they've all been pre-screened, so not only are they graded, but we've carefully looked at a large number of them and picked out the real fine, bright white examples. So they're really attractive looking, great way to invest for people that want to accumulate. And I really like silver. It's down just maybe 50 cents from its recent highs. And I think, again, I still expect silver to go quite high this year.
Yeah, we do too.
I just don't see how it won't.
Well, and the thing is that there's an uncertainty of the economy, which is what I want to close this out with, because, Peter Schiff came out with some stuff, and he's basically saying, he looks at the aesthetics of this situation and all the ethics of the situation and what the government could do or couldn't do. And, because he happens to run a gold company, everybody and their brother, is looking to get on the air somehow. And I was just never one of these to jump on all these other folks because of the fact that they're out there marketing to the masses. And here you are, working with little old me here on uscoincapital.com, which I appreciate that. Now, folks, if you want an education, you can call 1-800-878-2646, and I am not reading that off a sheet. I've got this number in my head because I call Fred on occasion. We have conversations about this, and I buy my gold and silver from Fred. So you guys need to be doing the same thing and taking advantage of this deal. I've always said dimes, quarters, halves, pre-65, that's your best bet right now if you're under accumulation. That's the most important thing. We got a minute left, Fred. Any closing comments?
I would just say this, that, given the nature of where we are in the economy, the expectations I have every time I run the numbers and look at every different way to look at it, all the different angles, are that the inevitable result of this is going to be a printing of an awful lot of money at a faster pace than most people are prepared for. And again, with expectations for inflation, they're the worst they've been in 30 years long term. Short-term expectations are actually fairly positive. Long-term is the worst in 30 years. So I think a whole generation of Americans are about to experience inflation, perhaps for the second time in their life, and they're not ready for it. So be prepared for these rising prices as a net result. And again, certainly if you can, hedge your bets with a little bit of gold and silver.
There you have it. Fred Dashevsky, uscoincapital.com. Thank you so much for being on the show. We're out of time for today, folks. But in the meantime, time to get under accumulation. Call Fred and tell him about the special. Remind him you heard it on the show here. In the meantime, we'll see you tomorrow. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. What's left of it? God help.